Isaac Asimov, born 1920, died 1992, was quite simply the most brilliant polymath that I have had the good fortune to share this world with, although he passed away before I was 30 years old. A biochemist, PhD by training, sometime professor at Columbia University, he dedicated his whole life to writing and wrote brilliantly, hilariously, very, very knowledgeably about every subject under the sun, from joke books to Shakespeare to cooking to history. But of course, his greatest contribution by far was in the field of science fiction. And although I have read so many extremely talented science fiction writers, in my mind, he remains far and away the best of them, and perhaps the best of really all time. Now, I was thinking about him and many of his stories because of late, AI, artificial intelligence, has been very much in the news. Though much of it is hyped propaganda, much of it is really coming true, and all that is very wonderful and fascinating and maybe in some senses frightening. Now, turning back in my mind to everything Asimov wrote on this subject 50, 60, 70 years ago, when computers were in a nascent stage of development, it strikes me as absolutely astonishing that he predicted so many things which are only now beginning to come true and which are still part of science fiction, an evolving reality which may or may not come true in the decades ahead. Now, it was Asimov who coined the word robotics and the laws of robotics, and the laws of robotics were first written down in a story called Runaround, and here are those three laws according to Asimov. 1. A robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. 2. A robot must obey the orders given it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And 3. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. Asimov had hoped that these laws would be deeply, ineradicably printed into every robot's mind through all future. And it was Asimov who hoped that these laws would ensure permanently for every single robot that would be built that those robots would work only in the service of humankind and never against them. But it was Asimov, exercising his endlessly creative and multidimensional imagination, who foresaw all kinds of alternative futures that could turn out as robots became more and more versatile and complex and sophisticated. Today, we are talking a great deal about AI and robots, all connected to the internet, functioning on the strength of AI and generative AI. And more, it seems likely that robots would become an inseparable, inevitable, and indispensable part of human life. And a lot of people are excited and fascinated and also frightened about what kind of future is evolving right in front of our eyes. And there are lots of people, including myself, I have written about this on my blog in recent times, who are frightened that a much superior intelligence, robotic intelligence, might, in the foreseeable future, really take over the world and subjugate or even eliminate humanity. Now, in this context, it is most instructive to read all the many robot stories that Asimov wrote and left behind. I even believe that all the great robot specialists working right now in the world today, it should be made mandatory for them that they have thoroughly read, understood, and remembered all these things that Asimov sketched in his mind for posterity, and take into account all the various possibilities that may come true as robots keep on developing. In this context, I shall mention only a few of the numerous stories, robot stories that Asimov wrote. I have in front of me a collection called The Complete Robot. Asimov wrote these stories over a 3 or 4 decade long period, beginning in the early 40s and ending in the 70s. So that's a pretty long time to be concerned with one topic. Now, I shall mention a few stories only to show how diversely he imagined alternative futures involving robots. There are touching, sentimental, lovable stories like A Boy's Best Friend, where a father is trying to convince a boy who is deeply in love with his robot dog that a real dog would be much more lovable and much more desirable than its robotic version because it has actual feelings, unlike a dog which is only programmed to show feelings. And the boy asks a question that the most accomplished robot engineer would be stumped by. The boy says, how do I know that a real living dog does not also merely display some sort of programmed emotions? How do we know what goes on inside the dog? And there's no answer for it, even now. And then there's that lovely story called Robbie, where a little girl is deeply in love with her robot caretaker, and the parents agree to keep that robot permanently at home only when the robot saves her from a deadly accident. There is the very creepy, flesh-crawling story called Sally about robotic motor cars. An old man takes care of those cars which have outlived their regular useful lives. And like horses in the olden days, rich people have left them in this old man's care. And some people try to steal those cars, and they come to a very nasty end. And this old man, he's saved from those robbers by this pack of cars which he used to tend to with loving care. And their leader is a car called Sally. But strangely enough, despite knowing that Sally and her friends had saved him from a nasty death, he slowly grows frightened of her and her ilk because he thinks that these cars are becoming too sentient, too intelligent for his own good, and someday they might take over the world, and someday they might want to eliminate all human beings so that the world remains only for them to enjoy. And perhaps, although he may be the last to kill, he still might be eliminated because they don't need him anymore. He's just a useless burden. There are so many other kinds of stories that he wrote. There's that lovely story that I mentioned in the beginning, Run Around, about how the 3 laws of robotics might conflict with one another, and how sometimes men can use those laws to take advantage of robots and save themselves from very dire critical situations. But there are also other stories where the opposite happens, where the robots start thinking of or actually taking advantage of those laws to distort them to their own advantage. There's a story called Someday, where a little robot which can only tell stories to children, that little robot, neglected, insulted, abused, harbors a deep and growing resentment somewhere inside its so-called heart, and he hopes that someday all robots like itself will get together and turn upon the humans who created them and then abused them and neglected them and belittled them and destroy them. The story is called Someday, and the robot stops talking at the end with that very creepy repetition, someday, someday, someday. There's an even more frightening story called That Thou Art Mindful of Him, where the robots decide that the original wording of the 3 laws of robotics can be altered to their own advantage, because after all, who are the best humans? The robots are programmed to take care of humans, to protect humans, and never to hurt humans. But how do you judge which human is better than whom, and which human has to be protected, and which human has to be hurt, and which human has to be destroyed? And they eventually arrive at the conclusion that the robots, are the real humans, the most superior humans, and therefore the 3 laws of robotics allow them to gradually subjugate, dominate, and if necessary, eliminate human beings altogether. By contrast, talking about parallel futures, Asimov wrote the other beautiful story called Bicentennial Man, where the robot falls so deeply in love with mankind that over a period of 200 years, a lifetime of 200 years, it gradually changes into a human being, uses the latest technology to modify itself little by little, step by step, until it becomes a human being in every sense of the word, which makes it mortal, and it ultimately accepts death as the quite affordable price of achieving humanhood. This was made into a lovely movie with the same name, The Bicentennial Man, where Robin Williams played the lead role. There are so many other bemusing stories like Segregationist, for example, where it is the robot who lectures the human being about why it is so important to be human and to maintain those characteristics which truly make us human, and why they will always be different. Robots and humans should always be different and not merge into the same kind of entity, the same mixed species. And it's ironic that the robot, a surgeon actually, is lecturing the patient about why this is the best of all possible worlds, robots and humans remaining permanently separate. And the doctor, the surgeon, is a robot himself. He is proud to be a robot and wants to remain a robot, and he wants that all human beings should remain separately robots. Asimov is endlessly fecund. He has imagined so many alternative futures that it is a wonder that one man could think of and create lovely stories about what robots might become and what they could do. Now, I shall encourage you at this point to find out about a wonderful, extraordinary character that he created, Dr. Susan Calvin, the world's greatest, in fact, the world's only robo-psychologist, and how she dealt with errant and disturbing and disruptive and dangerous robots. I will recommend at least two stories which I love, Liar and Little Lost Robot. There are so many others. There is a story called The Evitable Conflict, where ultimately robots have taken over, and humans understand that the robots have taken over, but they're happy. They're glad that the world is as it has become, because that is the only way humanity will ever find permanent safety and security and prosperity and peace. I hope. Now, all these ruminations came up in my mind in the context of a 2024 book written by Frank Pascal, who specializes in cyber laws in America. He has written a book called New Laws of Robotics, and he believes that Asimov's 3 laws need to be seriously modified to fit the current conditions, to suit all the possibilities that AI at its current pace of development is bringing up. He says the first new law should be that robotic systems and AI should complement professionals, not replace them. Number 2, robotic systems and AI should not counterfeit humanity. Number 3, robotic systems and AI should not intensify zero-sum arms races. And number 4, robotic systems and AI must always indicate the identity of their creators, controllers, and owners, who are obviously humans. He thinks that these 4 new laws would protect us much better against evolving AI and robotics than Asimov's 70-80-year-old laws could ever have. Well, I shall encourage all my listeners to explore Asimov in great detail. To remind you before I sign off, the book is called The Complete Robot. It is published by HarperCollins, and all the robot stories that Asimov wrote are lumped together in one volume. Read, enjoy, think, especially all the computer and IT and law specialists of the future. Good night.